I think we're going to be doing lots of things when we go to heaven, when we're there, but I don't think just laying around with a smirk on our face is going to be one of them. The problem with dumbing down God, with bringing God down to our level, is it has negatively affected every area of our lives. Not just one or one there, every area of our lives. And the problem is it's most prevalent in the church. We're the ones doing it, so it's most prevalent here. I want to talk about a few side effects of dumbing down who God is. The first thing, if we bring God down to our level, if we dumb down God, then there's no law. Let me explain it to you. If we are to impose laws in our society, we must first have the understanding that there are certain absolute truths that apply to all people, right? Shake your head so I know you're still awake and still with me. There are certain absolute truths that apply to all people at all times and during all times. Such absolutes, so these absolute truths, have to be based upon a standard. And that standard is God. He's constant. He's always the same, never wavering. So if God is dumbed down to our level, then he is less like a standard and more like us. If God cannot be relied on as a standard, then there can be no moral basis for absolute truth and no foundation for any law of any kind. So as a result, the people in power who make laws are able to make laws that they like and eliminate laws that they don't like. Does that sound familiar? And we're guilty of this in the church all the time. 2 General Assemblies ago, the Church of the Nazarene has General Assemblies every 4 years that get together as a global church to discuss and talk about what we believe and it's kind of a revival of some sorts. They give a report on what's happened and the issue with 2 years ago is they've decided to take out our core value. They've changed the language so it's not as meaningful, not as harsh. See, we're a holiness church. We believe that God can make us holy through entire sanctification. One of the key words in entire sanctification was eradication. Anybody kill pests? When you kill a pest, you want to eradicate it. The old words about entire sanctification was that it was the entire eradication of sin in our lives. No, that word's a little too harsh. We should probably take that out. We've begun to dumb down our own church. Not just God, but even ourselves. We've already fallen that first side effect of dumbing God down. You know, a lot of us like to hear sermons. We like to hear sermons that deal with, condemning the big sins like adultery or murder or drug use. We like those sermons. We're not so fond of the sermons that talk about gluttony, gossip, cleverly disguised as prayer meetings. Second side effect of dumbing God down is that because there's no law, there's no sin. If there could be no violation of the law, then there's no sin. Because of this, we live in a society where there's no sin, there's just kind of alternative lifestyles. Have you heard that phrase before? Because there's no absolute law, sin is only your opinion, not a fact. And of course, we in the church, we have our own weaknesses and we occasionally slip up, but we don't sin, do we? The third side effect, there's no incentive to change our lives. So if there's no law, then there's no sin, then why should we even strive to change who we are and make ourselves better? After all, we kind of enjoy doing the things that we do, don't we? The fourth side effect of dumbing down God is that there's no gospel anymore. If there's no law and there's no sin, there's no incentive to change who we are to make ourselves better, then the church has absolutely nothing to give the world. Because if there's no sin, there's no need for a Savior. If our God is not a holy God, then our opinion is just one among many acceptable things that might work out. We pay our money, we can go to the church of our choice, sit in the nicest pew. It's readily apparent that the church no longer believes in the gospel. If we really believed in the gospel, we wouldn't sit in our little churches talking about how wonderful our opinions are. We'd actually go out into the world and do it. The fifth side effect is there's little commitment among those who call themselves Christians. So if there's no law and there's no sin, there's no incentive to change, and there's no gospel to offer the world, then we as Christians really have nothing of significance to commit our lives to. The result is that churches, us, become more like a social club. It becomes more of one of those things of where, what can I get out of it versus what can I give? And so if our God is not a holy God, then he might as well take his place and sit next to the ACLU group or the Planned Parenthood group or the PTA or the Boy Scouts or whatever Christian organization or whatever we can come up with. The next side effect of dumbing down God is that the whole doctrine of God becomes disintegrated. The devil doesn't really need to make us atheists. All he has to do is remove that idea of holiness, that idea of who God is, that picture of holiness from our churches, from our Sunday schools, from our homes, from our textbooks, from our doctrine. And soon after that happens, we end up making atheists of ourselves. There was a Puritan who pointed out that the holiness of God is the one attribute that is behind every other attribute of God. And so, in other words, everything God is based on holiness. So if we lose the holiness of God, we lose all of who God is. For example, the omnipotence of God. You know what omnipotence is? Slow down, I'm tripping over my words. We know what that is. The omnipotence of God, apart from the holiness of God, is just mere tyranny. The goodness of God, apart from the holiness of God, just kind of falls into just random benevolence. And so apart from the holiness of God, we have not another God or something else, we have nothing at all. The Bible paints a different picture about holiness, though. The holiness of God caused Adam and Eve in their sin to hide. When confronted with the holiness of God, Moses covered his face and the children of Israel stayed at a safe distance. When confronted again with the holiness of God, Job's accusations turned into adoration and praise. When confronted with the holiness of God, the Apostle John fell at his feet as though dead. Where has that been in the church? Peter was confronted with the penetrating gaze of the holiness of God through Jesus immediately following his third denial. And then he left and went outside and wept bitterly. When have you wept bitterly? Whenever a man stares into the holiness of God, who blinks first? I don't think we just sit there with a smirk and a smile on our face thinking about who he is. When we encounter the holiness of God the way Isaiah did, we will see the Lord seated on a throne. It's a throne of glory before we have to worship. If we see the holiness, we're forced into worship. It's a natural response. It's a throne of government under which we're subject to. We follow his law. And it's a throne of grace which we can come boldly to. We'll see the Lord high and exalted. And we'll realize that he is holy. He is wholly other than anything we could ever think of or imagine. We'll realize that he is far greater than what we have pictured him to be. And that we'll become humble. We'll be humbled like we've never been humbled before. So we realize that we have to see God's holiness. The next thing we have to do that Isaiah did is we have to recognize our unholiness. In the next moment, after Isaiah realized that, he fell on the ground and cried out, "Woe to me, I am ruined. I am ruined." The problem is that we haven't only just dumbed God down, we've also defined deviancy down. You understand? Many of us have come to believe that because they've been filled with the Spirit and made holy, that they're faultless. The Bible doesn't teach that we're not faultless. If we're holy, we're blameless. If we're filled by the Spirit and walking in the light. There's a difference there. The difference is made clear when you examine the definition of sin. You guys know the definition of sin? There's really two that come out. There's the ethical definition. The ethical definition of sin is that it's a willful violation of a known law of God. And that's true. That's sin. If you willfully violate a known law of God, that's sin. Black and white. No room for interpretation there. But if you're not willfully, you're not intentionally breaking God's law, your transgression is automatically covered by the atonement. Remember what the atonement is? Let me talk about an Old Testament story to help you understand this. Now, this is a fictional story, but this is a law from the Old Testament. The Old Testament law says that an Israelite man cannot wear a piece of clothing made from two types of fabric. So there's no cotton polyester blends or things like that, so I'd be in trouble. So they can only wear clothing made of one type of material. That sounds like kind of a funny law, right? But it was a law of God for the Israelites. So picture this. There's a guy, he's going to go to work in the mountains. As he's going to the mountains, he decides, man, it's kind of chilly up here. I better get a coat. Finds a local village. There's a local shop. Goes, and he's a good Israelite man, so he knows the law. So he's examining this jacket, making sure that it's kosher. Little joke there. And he's going through and he's looking at it, and he doesn't see anything wrong with it. Everything's fine. Everything's great. So he purchases it. He wears it. He works in the mountains. It's a great jacket. It holds up. It's durable. It does quite well. But when he buys it, he doesn't notice that the buttons are sewn on with a different type of material. So if this man is working and dies, is he going to go to hell? No, because of the atonement. The atonement was a sacrifice made yearly for the Israelites to cover the sins that they didn't know they were committing. It was an unintentional sin. It was the atonement, the Day of Atonement, special ceremony, make a sacrifice for all the unintentional sins that we don't know about. They wanted to be covered. So, the story goes on. Say he doesn't realize it, unintentional sin, sounds kind of goofy, but still. It's in God's law in the Old Testament. He comes home. His wife runs to meet him at the door and immediately recognizes, because she's a woman and knows all about that stuff, wait a second, the buttons, fabric, different, you're in trouble. Now the man is made aware of his sin and he has a choice. He can either choose to live in his sin or he can repent. He can remove it, throw it away, be done with it. But now his sin, now that he's aware of it, it's become intentional. It's a willful violation of a known law against God. So there's a sense of which unintentional sin isn't considered sin until it's, because it's automatically covered by the atonement, by that sacrifice. The second definition of sin is the legal definition. And this is where we get into it and we really begin to manipulate it and change words. The legal definition of sin says that sin is any falling short of the glory of God. We've heard that before, right? Right, very good. And this is also true. It's like the first statement, willful violation, act against God. That's true, it's a sin. Second one,